All right, so I decided to do testing of the Book of Enoch. My goal is to not tell you how to view it or what to think or what to believe. My goal is to just show you some things, point out some things that you should be aware of, and hopefully I can encourage y'all to read the book for yourself so that you'd be able to understand it yourself. There's going to be quite a bit of direct quotes that I'm going to share. One thing to point out is there's actually more than one sets of books of Enoch. There's one called First Enoch, which is the body of books that we're going to be covering. That's the one that's popular that everybody knows about. There's also a second book of Enoch, which is also called the Slavic Enoch or the Old Bulgarian Enoch. That's another group, just to let y'all know. There's another one called the Third Enoch, or Three Enoch, and it's also called the Book of Palaces, the Book of Rabbi Ishmael, the High Priest, and that is actually a set of Enoch books that the Kabbalah uses. So I just want to let y'all know that we're going to be dealing with the first book 1 of Enoch, which is a collection of books. That's the one that's popular, that everybody reads, everybody knows about when they're referring to the Book of Enoch. All right. And I want this to be interacting. So if y'all want to ask questions or comments, please jump in. Don't want it to just be me. And depending on how many questions and stuff, that'll be, how y'all want it. If y'all want me to just read the text, then we can do that too. Just saying. So let's get started. So this is going to be the plan. We're going to go over dating. We're going to do high-level summaries of the particular books that are in the Book of Enoch, first book of Enoch. We're going to go over pros and cons as far as textual things, and you'll see. And then question and comments, that's for everybody at all times, but there will be a section at the end too. So what do the scholars say? The scholars believe that the books were originally written in Aramaic or Greek, and the only full version of the Book of Enoch is the Ethiopian text. It is written in Ge'ez language, and the scholars determined that it was translated into Ge'ez after the 3rd century AD. So let's get into the dating. So the very first book of the Book of Enoch is the Book of the Watchers, and that is dated to 200 to 150 BC. The second one is the Parables and the Book of the Noah fragment. That is 40 AD to 7 AD, or 40 BC to 7, it's BC to AD. One thing to point out is the Book of the Parables is only found in the Ethiopian text. It is not found in the Dead Sea Scrolls versions that they found.
What does it mean when it says a fragment? Does that mean only a fragment dating back to these times?
Yeah, they have some, exactly. Well, the fragment is for the Book of Noah.
Okay.
But the parables only exist in the Ethiopian text. The fragment that's for the Noah, that exists in the Dead Sea Scrolls as well. So this one is called the Course of Heavenly Luminaries and the Dreams and Visions, and this dates from 300 BC to 167 BC. And one thing I will say is, as you're going through these books, you do see a different level of sophistication. You can see the writers are different. You can tell by the way they write. This guy sounds very smart. This guy doesn't sound as smart. But they're still, dating for those time periods. So just wanted to point that out. The next one is the fragment of the Book of Noah. And that's between 150 BC, and then the scholars aren't too sure when it goes to. Could be sooner. And then the appendix of the Book of Enoch, which they date around 75 to 100 AD. So in all, the sections, they date from 300 BC to 100 AD. And you can tell that from the style of writing. They use different things over aging, and then the textual things that show up, they'll tell you when it should be dated to. So we don't see any dating that's going further back, like that you would see for things like, the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses, dating them around 1500 BC. You're not seeing those types of textual indicators to suggest that it's older. Just wanted to say it. This is what the scholars say and how they date things. Okay, so this is going to be the one that we're all focusing on, is R.H. Charles. R.H. Charles was an Irish biblical scholar and theologian. Translated the Book of Enoch in 1906. He later translated it again in 1917. And this is the one you see up there. This is the one that most people buy. This is the Book of Enoch that everybody reads. It's his translation that's the one that's popular and everybody goes to. This will be important later because we will be dealing with all the quotes that I'm going to be pulling, except for one, is coming from R.H. Charles and his translation. And he was a believer in Jesus. Just want to make that be a point. So that'll be apparent too when we get into some of the translation stuff. So there's all the different books and pictures of the ones out there. So the scholars say that the books of Enoch are pseudepigrapha. What is pseudepigrapha? Pseudo being not genuine, pigrapha being an inscription, and then the definition of pseudepigrapha is a falsely attributed work, text whose claims author is not a true author, or works of whose real author attributed it to a figure in the past. So some of the books, examples of pseudepigrapha, the Book of Jasher. I know a lot of people don't know about that, but they can actually track when Jasher pops up, and it was written by an Italian man in the 1600s. So it's not the real Book of Jasher. There was a Book of Jasher that was probably real, but we don't have that one. We have this modern one. Another one would be the first book of Adam and Eve. Do we really think Adam and Eve wrote that? And then here over here is the Pontius Pilate letters. I don't know if people know about this, but Eusebius actually wrote some letters between Pontius Pilate and someone else talking about Jesus. And he tries to pass them off as real, authentic letters from Roman Pontius Pilate. This is another example of pseudepigrapha. This one being very obvious because of the dating and then what's being said. He actually puts things in there that's completely unbiblical. It's kind of crazy. But anyways, moving on. So some high-level summaries of the Book of Enoch. The Book of Watchers and Parables is about the angels coming down with the daughters of man and producing giants, and all the fallen angels are responsible for teaching mankind very specific things. Heavenly Illuminaries is about the movement of the sun, the moon, and stars, with angels being responsible for their movements, and there's also a calendar that is described in this book. Dreams and Visions is about the animal symbolic story of Exodus and a Messiah. Fragments of the Book of Noah is about the birth of Noah and his amazing abilities. I'll leave that as a little mystery right there. All right, let's get into some of the pros and cons. So the pros and cons, specifically the pros, what I used is some of the skills of textual analysis and looking for Hebrewisms and Hebrew thought patterns. And so that's some of the things that I was looking for when analyzing these books. So these are some of the good things that you would say these are pros. So Aramaic fragments found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. There are religious principles that that are in the Bible. Example, God, angels, rainbows, lambs, righteous, sin, wicked, and you can see law in there. Okay, I thought you raised your hand. There are verses that are very similar to the verses in the Bible, not exact quotes. That's something you'll see online, that they'll say it directly quotes, Jude, or it directly quotes some of these other places. But actually, it's not a direct quote. It's just almost exactly. It's very similar. And some of these quotes are, you got to think, if it's coming from the Old Testament, well, these books are dating to 300 AD, and those books would be around. So if people were quoting it, they probably would already know those verses. But those are the ones that are similar in the New Testament. They're not exact quotes. Just wanted to point that out. There are Hebrew thought patterns and Hebrew idioms present throughout the books, and we're going to get into a bunch of those. There's another pro. The early church father Tertullian advocated that the Book of Enoch to be included as inspired biblical canon. And there's actually quite a bit of early church fathers debating back and forth on the Book of Enoch. That dialogue's out there too. So let's get into some Hebrew idioms. So this one right here is from chapter 1. But with the righteous he will make peace and will protect the elect, and mercy shall be upon them, and they shall all belong to God. And they shall be prospered, and they shall all be blessed, and he will help them all, and light shall appear upon them, and he will make peace with them. And this is a common thing that exists in Hebrew, where you're doing and. It doesn't exist in the Greek. So another example would be and the floor and the table and the trees and the wall and the window. And you can see that actually throughout the book, there's quite a bit of this going on. That's a good sign, as far as it being a Hebrew writer, or Hebrew-minded writer. Here's another one from chapter 60. And the head of days sat on the throne of his glory, and the angels and the righteous stood around him, and a great trembling seized me, and fear took hold of me, and my loins gave way, and dissolved were my reins, and I fell upon my face. Another and. I know I'm overkilling it. Here's another one. Y'all would easily recognize this one. Those who sleep not bless thee. They stand before thy glory and bless, praise, and exalt, saying, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of spirits. He filleth the earth with spirits. This holy, 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 repeating something 3 times. It's like it's yelling it, making it really loud. And that's the Hebrew thought pattern. Yes? Yeah, exactly. Here's another one, using the term Son of Man. And they shall be downcast of countenance, and pain shall seize them when they see that Son of Man sitting on the throne of glory. And that's another, we all know that. And here's another one. This one is about the yoke. Heavy shall be its yoke upon you. And that's an ancient Hebraic agricultural term. And you can see my picture over here. Make sure your yoke is evenly tied. This guy's giving up. There's a little kid staring at him. Yes, go ahead.
So, are you going to talk at all about why Enoch's not included in the Tanakh?
Well,
Get into that? I'm just wondering, because this is a good reason why.
not as far as Tanakh goes, but like for canon, as far as like Old Testament canon, I think. No, I don't know, and I don't see any.
Like this.
Well, the only people I see talking about it is Christians, and I don't see any Jewish discussions or anything like that. I haven't come across it. Maybe it's out there, but I think if you stick with me, some of the things you're going to see that might answer your question. Yeah. Okay. So here's another Hebrew thought pattern. And the days of tribulation of the sinners, your children shall mount and rise as eagles. This is a concept of travel when you're mounting up with eagle's wings. This is a Hebrew thought pattern that you're going to go. Chapter 100. And he will appoint guardians from amongst the holy angels to guard them as the apple of an eye until he makes the end of all the wickedness and all sin. And, of course, apple of an eye is a very Hebraic term. It's like I can do something with this. It's Proverbs. It's in Psalms. And there's the verses up there. Is everybody still with me? All right. Hopefully I didn't put you to sleep. All right, now we're going to get into some of the cons. And these are things that should make you say, I need to look into this more. One of the things that there's a present is we know when there was the ban of the name, and that was first implemented by the Greeks, but it didn't take. And then later, post the destruction of the temple, that's when they started doing the ban, around 134 AD, if I'm not mistaken. So one of the things that you would see is there should be the name Yehovah. There should be, or at least the Tetragrammaton being present if this is a religious text. And it was very common that if texts were not religious, they wouldn't include God's name because it was too special of a thing to just be putting into any type of writing or text. And they would even use abbreviations even if they were writing letters and stuff like that. Okay, go ahead.
The Tanakh canon was established before even the first verse came into the first verse, if its first earliest verse, like on that was correct, would be 300 BC. The Hebrew canon, even I think Malachi was probably what the last book written in the Old Testament, and it was written
I guess the bigger question might be, how do they view it? It's written by Hebrew authors and it's found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. How would a rabbi or somebody view Enoch?
Yeah.
What would be their pros and cons as to why they think it's authentic or not?
Yeah. One thing I would say is, you do have multiple factions of Judaism. You don't have just one group. And I think a lot of people, and we'll get into, we might talk about this a little bit later, but a lot of people will view the Qumran people as being the authors of these books. And so they're saying this is a different sect that's over here. And so, I mean, we can talk about that a little bit.
View anything from distrust.
Maybe, yeah.
And also, the Book of Enoch was written by many authors
That's right.
over a lot extended period of time, from
Yeah.
over a period of 400 years, whereas all the other books of the Bible were written by one single author in that time and this time originally existed.
Yeah.
Ryan, do you know the other book in the Bible that doesn't have the name of God in it?
Esther. But I heard that there's a code underneath. No, like every so many letters, there's Yod He Vav He Yod He Vav He. I'm not sure. Maybe you can look into that. I've heard that once, and I don't know if that's true.
Now,
So I haven't looked at the Hebrew.
in the Torah, there is like a Bible code in the first bit of each of the five, but I had not heard that. So that was interesting.
Okay, let's look at some examples where you should see God's name being used. So the very first one, some of these chapters are out of order, but just bear with me. I have the books here if anybody wants to look at them, and I got little post-its and stuff. But yeah, so for they have denied the Lord of spirits and his anointed, and the name of the Lord of spirits be blessed. And in Hebrew, if you're about to say his name be blessed, then you would say his name. You would include it either before or after you're talking about his name. You can see that in all the Old Testament stuff. You know, his name is mentioned 6,827 times, and just in the Old Testament. But yeah, and what you see very commonly throughout the books, multiple books, right, is the Lord of Spirits term being used. And so you'll see that again here. So in chapter 61, blessed is he, and may the name of the Lord of Spirits be blessed forever and ever. Why aren't they using his name? But anyways. Now therefore I swear to you, the righteous, by the glory of the great and honor, and to mighty one in dominion, and by his greatness I swear to you, I know a mystery. And this is Enoch talking here. I mean, most of the book is talking from the point of view of Enoch writing and discussing things. And here he's swearing, or using the connotation of swearing, and he should be saying, I swear by God, or I swear by Jehovah. His name should be there. If it's an ancient document which is claiming to be back from Noah post-flood, that he came back and wrote all this. So if you're dating it to when the text is declaring itself, you should see stuff like that in here.
So that is a good point. So when is the text declaring itself to power?
The text in itself is saying that this is Noah, or this is Enoch writing this stuff down. This is his information he is revealing to mankind.
This is like 2500 BC?
Well, Enoch is before the flood. So you would have the flood in between, and then you would have Enoch supposedly coming back down and giving these documents, or by some miracle these things made it through the flood, or by some other miracle that Noah included them in his ark and kept them safe. I mean, however you get there is however you get there, but that's not what the text is telling you how it survived. It's not doing that. It's just telling you who's writing it and what they're saying.
So, if it is an ancient document and a lot of copies were made like any other ancient document, wouldn't it be plausible to say that the copies that were made after 134, they could have taken the name out of, just like in our gospel?
Well, you could say that because when they translated it, or this particular translation, it comes from the Ethiopian text. However, when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, there included some Enoch text. And so those were frozen in time, and they were buried away prior to the ban of the name.
And when was the ban?
In around, if I'm not mistaken, 134 AD. Is that right? Is that the right year?
Would have been a little bit later, around 300.
168 AD?
132, 135 was the Summer Cultural Revolt. And after that, it was after church and Roman Church started doing a persecution of Jewish people, forbidding Jewish people to, and I think the, I think the Masoretic texts were done around 300 AD. So it would be probably between 145 and 300.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, you know, these scholars have compared them after finding the Dead Sea Scrolls. So they find some differences, and I'll get into a few of those little things as far as like stuff being added. Like I mentioned, the Book of the Parables is not found in the Dead Sea Scrolls version, and the Book of the Parables ones is talking about in a very symbolic way the Messiah, and so that's not actually in the Dead Sea version ones. So you could argue that it's a later edition, and there's some other stuff, but as far as the name being banned, that you can see that kind compared to the Dead Sea Scrolls, that's still saying the same thing that the Ethiopian text is saying. Yeah.
Maybe this is a dumb question, but are we supposed to assume, reading this book, that this is Enoch writing all of this stuff, even though you were saying clearly at the beginning that the different chapters or the different books seemed to be clearly written by different authors because they had different,
Right.
ways of writing and different levels of sophistication.
Right. That's what the text is saying, that this is Enoch, the whole authorship. And actually, there's one section. It's a little strange. I found it. I think people skip over it. Well, according to R.H. Charles's version, there's a section where the authorship changes just for like 2 paragraphs, and it's Lamech writing now. But that's just, I think maybe it's a mix-up or maybe a translation issue or something. I don't know. But I found that too. It's a little bit weird. All right. Here's another example. It says, I swear unto you that in heaven and the angels remember you for good. And what is he swearing to? He's swearing to you, but on behalf of what? It was very common. Even people would swear to, I swear by the soil, or I swear by my house, or I'd swear by, the rabbis got in trouble for swearing by all kinds of things. And you're supposed to swear by Jehovah. Actually, the Old Testament tells you to swear and make oaths in his name. So if they're a good, follower of the scriptures, they would be swearing using his name. So let's get into these giants, the heights of the giants. How tall were they? So this is straight from the text. And actually, the eels part is actually across all the translated, Dead Sea Scrolls versions and the Ethiopian text. And it says, and they became pregnant, and they bear great giants whose height was 3,000 eels, who consumed all the acquisitions of man. And when the men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And so now we're going to get into how big is an eel. So the modern interpretation of the eel is 3.75 feet. That would put 3,000 eels as 11,250 feet tall giant. How big was that giant? How big was the baby? That must have been crazy. All right, so but you could always argue, hey, that's modern. That's the modern number. What's actually the ancient measurement for the eel? And that's a good point. So the ancient times, one eel was 18 inches. 3,000 eels is 4,500 feet. Still quite big. It's pretty tall. I think that the heads would be in the clouds, but so let's do some comparison. So this is the Empire State Building. The Empire State Building is 1,454 feet in New York City. That would be almost 4 times as tall as that building.
See why they consumed everything.
How many giants were there? If there was 50 of them, there'd be nothing left. You'd be eating everything. This is what the text is claiming. So Mount Hermon, this is another one. And actually, I actually did a lot of condensing. I've actually found quite a bit more as far as the pros and cons, but just wanted to let y'all know that there is more, and I do challenge everybody to read it for yourself and see it. But to just be aware of these little things. So Mount Hermon, this is what it says, and this is the angels talking here. Let us all swear an oath and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then swear they all together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were all in 200. And who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon, and they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves to mutual imprecations upon it. And this is basically these fallen angels that have come down, and they've come down to Mount Hermon, and they said, we're going to make this oath to do a bunch of bad stuff and to teach mankind a bunch of bad stuff, and we're all going to stick to it. And by the way, this mountain is now called Mount Hermon because we did this on it. The problem with that is pre-flood, Psalms 104, the mountains rose, the valleys sank, and Mount Hermon might not have even been in existence if this is pre-flood stuff. All the terrain, and of course, we know how Mount Hermon got its name. Deuteronomy 3:9, we read that the Sidonians called this mountain Sirion, and the Amorites called it Senir, and the Hebrews named this mountain Mount Hermon, but it also appears to have been known as Sion, Deuteronomy 4:48. So we understand how it got named, but the Book of Enoch is giving us something very different. Here's another one. In the Bible, we all know that Noah and his sons built the ark, or maybe it says just Noah. I'm not too sure. I haven't looked at it. But we understand that it's Noah. And the ark is not being built by Noah in the Book of Enoch, chapter 67. And in those days the word of God came unto me, and he said unto me, Noah, thy lot has come up before me, a lot without blame, a lot of love and uprightness. And now the angels are making a wooden building. This is R.H. Charles' version. And they have completed that task, and I will place my hand upon it and preserve it. You have the angels actually building the ark in the Book of Enoch. You talking about the Noah story? Yeah, actually, Russell Crowe. Yeah, there's actually quite a bit of stuff in there that they did take from the Book of the Watchers. Yeah. So let's talk about some fallen angels and them teaching stuff. Now, in comparison to the Bible, you have God teaching us stuff. You have God getting credit for things, and of course, he should be getting the credit. But the Book of Enoch is not giving what they would call the Lord of Spirits the credit. It's giving these fallen angels credit. And to me, that's a little bit strange because that's not generally how Old Testament thought patterns work. So let's get into some of them. So chapter 69, and the third was named Gadriel, and it is who showed the children of man all the death blows. So it's talking about weaponry and murder. The Bible says that Cain brought murder into the world. And I think it says somewhere that God teaches my hand to war. I think that's David. Is that right? Yeah. And so here's another one, verse 6. This is actually continuing. And it says, and he led astray Eve and showed the weapons of death to the sons of men. Other version says that he seduced Eve. By this account, or by the Book of Enoch, it uses the word Azazel as being Hasatan, the leader of all these fallen is his name. But actually in the Book of Enoch, it's saying this other one named Gadriel, that he's getting credit for leading astray Eve. So you actually have a different fallen angel leading astray or seducing, which I don't like that term, but they actually use that for the translation, Eve in the garden. And and so let's go on to some other fallen angels. Do I have any questions or comments or anything? Okay, just checking. So here's another one. I'm not going to pronounce that name, This is a different angel, and he instructed mankind in writing with ink and paper. And I'm not too sure why it doesn't use a term like scroll, or why they didn't translate it for scroll, but they didn't. And thereby man sinned from eternity to eternity, and until this day, for man were not created for such a purpose, to give confirmation to their good faith with ink and paper, or pen and ink. So, by this measure, reading and writing is evil, and we should all just stop doing it. So don't look at my PowerPoint because you're reading. Here's some of the things that the angels are getting credits for, and you can cross-check them. Weapons, they're getting credit for teaching mankind weapons, shields and armor, bitter and sweet things to eat, smiting of the embryo in the womb. I thought that was interesting, because I think that that could apply across into the Torah. Taking oaths, not biblical oaths, root cutting, magical art and enchantment, astrology, astronomy, knowledge of the clouds and skies, signs of the sun, lunar courses, reading and writing, diagnosing and healing of disease, jewelry, makeup, and precious stones. Sorry, ladies. Yikes.
Well, there's a lot of churches still. My ex-husband his family was part of one, and they still don't wear jewelry and makeup or have TVs in their houses and are very old school. And a lot of this. Although I think you could say, looking at our society, that there's probably a lot of that kind of stuff that people are a little straight on.
Yeah, and you can certainly go overboard with any of those things. But to me, I would think, the mixed multitude at Mount Sinai, they probably were wearing makeup if they came from Egypt. And it really wasn't described that, hey, stop doing that. God didn't say that. And you see jewelry later in time period too. And earlier, yeah, of course. Breastplate and people wearing earrings and stuff like that. So. But apparently the fallen angels did all that, or taught mankind those things.
Well, the theory that I paint this picture in my mind. The watchers exist around the throne. They used to. They were in a habitation setting with Father. They knew all the sciences. They knew all the stones. They knew all the everything. They knew all the metaphysicals that would create the weaponry. They knew all that. And did they not bring it to earth and then put the evil twist on all of it? So, you go back and, I'm struggling with this stuff. And then I think, well, Father, he has stones that he's put all around his throne. So what is his purpose for these things? And then the watchers were to taint everything that they knew, that hyper knowledge that they had, and then they twisted it to not be used for Father's glory or his kingdom use, but to do the opposite, the exact opposite of everything Father intended.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Well, I would by no means say that fallen angels aren't interacting and aren't trying to do these things and tell people these things. Because, you have witchcraft, you have people actually seeking out and trying to communicate with them, and they claim that they get information and they've picked up stuff. Maybe that's real. I don't doubt it. The angels know a lot of things. That's not what I'm saying there. I'm just saying that this book is making very specific detail of which angels are teaching which things. This is which would be added information. And by no means am I saying that Genesis 6 is incorrect. I'm saying that Genesis 6 says what it says, and then this book is saying I'm adding extra detail. I'm bringing in new information that people don't know. But I'm pointing out those specific things. And by one account, it lists those particular angels for teaching each specific thing. And it says that there is 15 angels. It says it specifically. There's 15, and if you count them up, it's not 15. It's like only like 11. So even in that particular text of listing it, they even get it wrong. But I mean, so there's little things like that. And I'm just pointing out. This is all added extra information that whoever's writing it is putting in. Does that answer your question?
I was just thinking an imagination.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not saying fallen angels aren't manipulating mankind.
My ears.
I think they are. And there's people probably serving them. Anyways, I mean, people are serving Lucifer. He's a fallen angel. Or Hasatan. Any more other questions, comments?
I am I correct?
Well, the Watchers is the oldest text. It's the one that dates back the furthest, 300 AD. And the Watchers, I think it's like a term that's used for both the fallen and non-fallen. Like Michael, the angel Michael would be a Watcher too. It's just like a above term that these people are in a different realm and they're watching us.
Hierarchy, right? In army, so they are the next ones up to the throne as the Watchers, right? So
They would be the ones that didn't fall. So, I mean, you see, am I describing it correctly? As far as like, you have Watchers being all of the ones in a different realm, and then you have Watchers that have fell, and those are the fallen angels.
So Brian, going back to the video that Don showed a little while ago, you know, the heavenly beings that gather around in that first scene of Job, right? The Hebrew behind it is the name Elohim, right? And it's used in a few different places in Scripture, which will blow your mind if you actually
Some
study that.
majestic plural.
Well, no, it's just like, you know, that Satan was there as one of those. And you see in Daniel, you see this angel type, because I'm not classifying it correctly, but, you know, that's over this area of land, and over this area of land. You see this floating through Daniel and a few other places.
Yeah.
So it's definitely biblical that there are
Yeah.
spiritual, whatever we're titling those beings that are, you know, either allocated by geographic region. I mean, again,
Yeah.
it's woven through Scripture.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if that term in the Hebrew ties into the term that Lynn is asking about the Watchers. Is it B'nai Elohim in the Hebrew, or is it
I haven't looked at it. I don't have the Hebrew. Well, yeah, no, that's a good point. And I don't think we have Aramaic, we have Greek, and we have the Ethiopian. So I don't think we have a Hebrew text, but we have Hebrew undertones to suggest that it might have been written in Hebrew, or it could have just been written in Aramaic by a person who knows Hebrew and knows the scriptures. So I don't know. And I don't know if we're going to get that answer. Unless they find a Hebrew one,
Well, just
I don't know if we'll get that answer.
translating things backwards, right? Because we don't have, we don't have word for word, but we can see how they translated other things and extrapolate
Sure.
out, okay, here's how they
Sure.
translated it. But I haven't looked at that in any way, it just hit my mind.
That's a good thing to chase down, actually. And I will say this, so to add even more mystery, there is a complete version in Aramaic, I think it's in Aramaic, that is privately owned and nobody's ever looked at. Some rich guy bought it and he has it. So, it's more mystery.
Now, remember that, like with the angels, you've got like the seraphim, the cherubim, all these, I mean, there obviously is a hierarchy of angels,
Mhm.
but, the watchers being what kind of angel? Or just, you know what I mean? Like,
I think this is just being used as a general term. It's not a term that was actually used as far as like biblical canon or what you were describing, the seraphim and all that. They're not using that term. They're using a very different way of speaking, actually. So let's continue. Fallen angels getting credit for things. This is a different one. This is talking about the levels. For man, we're created exactly like the angels, to the intent that they should continue pure and righteous in death, saying that the angels can die. And we know that Adam was created from the dirt, and we were created by the womb, and that we're not on the same level as the angels. You can see Psalms and Hebrews for that. Now let's get into the heavenly luminaries. So one of the things that you'll see in the Bible, you'll see biblical numbers, 7, 12, 10. These are 40 years. You see these biblical numbers over and over, and they're always being used. One of the things that jumped out to me when reading it is they keep using non-biblical numbers. For example, chapter 72, you got 6, 30, 9, 30, 5, 6, 9, 30, and they just continue using these numbers over and over, and they're not using biblical Hebrew 7s, 12s, and 10s, 3s. So that was interesting, and I haven't looked into it, but I would suspect that the Greeks used these types of numbers, and that would be something to look into. Just a little rabbit trail for people.
But I'm not saying it's like all of them. I'm just saying that the threes.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
But it's not like, I'm just saying some things are like, there's some implication, but.
Sure.
So
I agree.
you've got some occultic numbers, and then what Brian said at the beginning, that was it the third set of books are used by Kabbalah.
That's a different sets of Enoch text.
Okay, collection, gotcha.
Yeah, you have 3 different collections.
All right, never mind.
You have 1, 2, and 3, and 1 is all of the stuff you're seeing today. The Watchers. That's the one that everybody reads. To give you a little tiny piece of Enoch 3. Enoch 3 is about a rabbi named Ishmael who claims that he's a high priest, even though the temple was destroyed. So I don't know how he's a high priest, and that he went up into heaven by way of some mystical thing that he did, because this is Kabbalah stuff, and that he met with an angel on a throne, and that angel was Enoch. And that's what that text is dealing with. That Enoch actually became an angel, or he was an angel the whole time. So that's that book. There's actually PDFs online.
The DNA.
We'll say that again.
That would then, if Enoch was an angel, that would corrupt the DNA.
Did Enoch have children?
They're not, I mean, it does, he's the grandfather of Noah,
Oh,
so.
yeah, he had Lamech.
That can't be.
And Lamech had Noah.
Knowing the DNA.
Yeah. But maybe he was a good angel. Yeah, I understand. But that text is dated to like 200 AD-ish, give or take. But that's one that they use in Kabbalah. Just a little teaser. It's online if you want to find the PDF.
In that chapter 72, are the fallen angels the ones using the 6, 30, 9, 11? Because they're fallen.
Yeah,
So
it's
they're going to not want to use godly numbers. They're going to want to use the anti-godly numbers.
well, now you're tapping into something else. That's a different conversation
You know,
of like who's in charge of this book getting out there to people. But anyways, so let's do 74, chapter 74. All the days which are accurate or accrue to it for one of those 5 years, when they were full amount to 364 days, and the sun and the stars bring in all the years exactly, but but complete the years with perfect justice, 364 days. So and this is just a snippet, but the whole chapter describing things happening and describing the sun and the moon and actually a calendar. And this calendar is 364 days. This is, if it's dating to when it should be saying it's dating to, that this is the Enoch original, you shouldn't see a celestial calendar of 364 days. What you should see is a Hebraic creator's calendar or something similar, and it should date to 355 days if you're dating it to the time when it's talking about it. And so I would say that this particular book, as far as the courses of heavenly luminaries, that this person is being influenced by a society that is using a celestial solar calendar. And here is a quote by one of the scholars, as far as George Nicholsberg. The Enochic use of pagan mythology motifs and its preachments against Gentile oppression are clear markers of the text setting in a less Hellenistic world and of its complex interactions with the events and culture of its world. So this Hellenistic thing, this is something that the scholars actually talk about. And for it to have a calendar that is solar, well, that's what the Greeks and the Romans, they used the solar calendar, 364 days. This is something that should jump out to people.
Well, based on the dates, like most of this was written around the, 165 BC. So that's only 15 years before the Maccabean Revolt. That was 150 BC, which is 150 years before Yeshua. So
Yeah.
15 years previously, these books are being written. Right?
Well, I think the heavenly luminaries, the heaven luminaries actually dates back a little bit further. It's closer to the Watchers one, which would be, more towards the 300 BC mark, which would make sense because the Greeks were in charge of them at that time. You see what I'm saying? Like, you're living under a Greek authority. You're probably going to use their calendar depending on where you live and where you're at. And they're going to have sundials around and stuff like that. And we found a bunch of those doing archaeology.
So the 355 days is referred to as the Enoch calendar.
No, 355 days is the Hebraic biblical calendar, give or take an extra month. The Enoch calendar that's being described is a celestial calendar, 364 days. Or 365? 364?
The
Yeah.
assertion is that the Enoch calendar could have those pagan mythological motives incorporated. That's what is implied.
Right, and actually, I could point out some other things, which will be the next slide, that will kind of lean you more towards that way as well, as far as pagan stuff. So here's in chapter 75. This is actually the same chapter. This particular angel showed me open the circumference of the sun's chariots in heaven. And let me just keep going. And I saw chariots in heaven running in the world above those portals. I'm not sure why it uses portals instead of gates. Maybe it's a translator. In which revolved the start that never set. The one is longer than all the rest, and it is that makes its courses through the entire world. I think there's another one. Yeah, and so what you have is angels in chariots, and these are just little snippets, but if you keep reading the whole paragraph and the whole chapter, it's talking about these angels getting credit for the movement of the heavens as to oppose God getting credit for these things. Also, the text seems to be a geocentric mindset. I just threw that in there because it does do that. But if you remember Greek mythology, you have Apollo pulling the sun with his chariots. you have other people doing things, and so this really feels like it's using Greek mythology or Hellenistic world mindset. That doesn't take away that the person might be Hebrew and they might know the law because he's using law terms and stuff. But I just wanted to point that out.
It's interesting, this language here, if you think about like a lot of the architecture and art that you see in a lot of these churches with up at the top, there's like a portal to heaven,
Yeah.
angels all swirling around, and it's reminded me of that. It's interesting.
And I also think that, didn't they say, I read somewhere, maybe it was a commentary, that God's armies never used chariots. So when God, the Egyptians chased them with chariots, but his people, David, didn't fight with chariots. That's a very pagan
Well,
weapon of war.
I-
It's not a God weapon of war. So it
I
doesn't-
think as far as like David is like his most skilled like tool was teaching people how to fight from horseback, but I don't think they did not have chariots. I think we do have evidence that Solomon did have chariots. So I think people did have chariots, but it's like what type of military you want to use. How easy is it to turn a chariot and shoot? You can't. It's very one directional, and you have very specific things that you can do. So
It doesn't work very well.
yeah, I don't think that you can make the jump as far as like chariots or pagan, or chariot or
It might have been,
Yeah.
it was Michael Reed when he was doing the Red Sea crossing with the chariots in there,
Well, and remember, beforehand, there was scripture from the prophets telling the kings not to have too many horses, too many chariots, like there was.
Trust in chariots.
Yeah, there was like a limit that was put on for the kingdom of Israel, that they ignored, but,
Of course they ignored it.
so did they, use it.
I was about to say.
Yeah, I mean you have chariots of fire and stuff like that, but yeah. All right, so Noah's description. So this one's got a different feel because this is a much later text. This dates really late. This is from I forget. I think it's the fragment of Noah, the appendix of Noah. But this little teaser that I said, this amazing abilities of Noah. And his body was white as snow and red as a blooming of a rose, and his hair on his head and his long locks were white as wool, and his eyes beautiful. And when he opened his eyes, he lighted up the whole house like the sun, and the whole house was very bright. And thereupon he arose in the hands of the midwife, opened his mouth, and conversed with the Lord of righteousness. His eyes were as the rays of the sun. And this is immediately after Noah was born. So he just came out as a baby, and now he's standing up. He's got light beams shooting out of his eyeballs, and he's talking and praising the Lord on minute 1. And this is just something that it's different because you don't see Noah being described as anything special in the Torah. You don't have him, with laser beams.
Who was where they got
So this story, are you going to get into any more of this?
No, I'm not, but I can talk about it a little bit.
So Lamech, when he sees this,
Yes.
he's convinced that his wife has been, that Noah is Nephilim.
From mating with an angel.
Offspring of an angel and his wife had not been faithful.
And he freaks
So
out.
no normal baby. And so he then goes, Lamech travels to find Enoch.
He flees in a fleeing manner
Okay.
away, and he goes and finds Lamech.
Finds Enoch to ask Enoch, hey,
Yes.
God doesn't hide anything from Enoch. Let me go find my father.
Okay.
Or grandfather.
Yeah.
I don't remember which it is. At any rate, this is also confirmed in another book called the Book of
interesting.
interesting
Yeah.
that there's fragments found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but there's so little that you
Yeah.
can piece together. You can put together these stories after the fact and try to get it to line up. It's just
Yeah.
somebody went to great lengths to have this kind of
And of course, Enoch was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, so they might have found them right there together.
yeah.
You know,
What were those scenes up to?
right?
So now that all the Essenes are looking at front up in heaven, looking down, laughing, and saying, "We were reading those like the funny papers."
Well, I mean,
Sorry.
so I wasn't going to get too much into the Essenes, but I will say two things. So the Essenes had two canons. They had a primary authoritative religious canon, and then they had a secondary canon. And the scholars believe that Enoch was in the secondary canon, which would be like the smaller canon of books. And another thing that I'll mention is the Essenes were completely obsessed with angels. They obsessed over them. And these books are giving us added information about fallen angels and other angels. And so, could they have been the author? Possibly. Do we know for certain? Probably not. Okay, so we're almost wrapping it up. So this one I call the big problemo. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's the question. If the Essenes were obsessed with angels, why were they obsessed? Why is our society obsessed with what it's obsessed with? So if we say right now in the body of Yeshua that we are obsessed with angels, that makes us all nervous. But if the Nephilim existed, and I'm looking for a time frame, if the Essenes, if they were obsessed with angels and they had to discern good and bad because they were actually looking at and they're walking among us, that might give them a right to be obsessed and study out and look like they were obsessed. Did they have a reason to be?
I mean, that's a good question.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand that. And so, like, people will just trust the Essenes, though. But you got to dig into, like, what did they believe? And I wish Cody was here because he really dug into the Essenes. And, like, how was it like living with them? Well, they were obsessed with a lot of different things. They were obsessed with ritual cleaning, and they only got water in a very small amount of time. And most of the people were miserable. They only lived to about 30 years old because they were all sick constantly, bathing in the same water all year long. And one person gets sick, everybody else gets sick. And they were obsessed with a lot of different things. They
What would be the time frame that
the Essenes, they would actually overlap exactly when the Book of Enoch's are all stretched to.
But not when it was supposed to have taken place.
Not to when it was taking place. Only to when they were being dated to be written.
200
Yeah, I think 200 AD or 400 AD or 400 BC to like 200 AD.
Okay. So well after.
Right at the right time period.
Prevalent walking on the earth.
Supposedly.
Okay.
Evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, evidence.
Well,
See, that's where I get hung up in that whole thing, is
Yeah.
that piece right there.
right.
Is what did they see? What did the people
Yeah.
see for how many centuries? What did they see walking among them? Okay, I won't say.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would just think that if there were still angels and Nephilim prevalent,
Well,
you would see them at that latest stage. You would see them in a lot of other
Yeah.
writings, because there would be writings from
Well,
the Greeks. From
right. Yeah, and I would say that the Essenes did write some stuff, and they used a specific term for who they were, but like these particular texts are not being written as if the Essenes are writing them.
Right.
They're writing them as if Enoch is writing them
Lamech.
and Lamech. Like they're being passed off as something that's really far back. That's just a little thing. And one thing I'll say is that the Essenes, I think at the most that they've ever had was like 4,000 altogether of the history of the Essenes people. So you're talking about a very small amount of people, and only 60 to 100 people lived on the actual site of Qumran. The rest of the people were in little camps and tents all around, and they would just daily travel back and forth to the Qumran site to bathe. So it's a very, very small amount of people. And they were writing, they were scribesmen, and they were making copies, and they probably went to other areas, got their text, brought them here, made copies, and gave it back. So they were very hyper-focused people. But that's just a little bit. You can go.
Around 200 BC to the destruction of the temple.
Okay.
So the only lasted around 270 years. They even had a replica of the temple built in Qumran.
They did?
And actually did sacrifices in their altars, had their own priests, like the priests in Jerusalem. There's actually in archaeology, you can actually go in and see the actual
Bones.
foundations where that temple was.
Wouldn't that be like violating
Yes.
in your city gates or whatever?
But they saw the temple and the priesthood as so corrupt, like that's why they felt justified in doing the things that they did, is because they saw what was happening in Jerusalem and they didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
But yes, just like with the Samaritans and what they did as well is also not what you were supposed to do.
Yeah, I wish Cody was here because he could tell you like they also implemented like man-made regulations to make sure people don't sin, kind of like what the Pharisees were doing in Jerusalem.
One of the theories is that the Essenes were actually the temple priests
Yeah.
up until the time of the time that the priesthood began to be sold to the highest bidder of the Romans.
Yeah.
And that's when they fled Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Down to the outlying villages.
Right.
And they felt they had the right to establish the temple in there because they were the true priests versus the ones that were established by the Romans.
Yeah, and again, I wish Cody was here because he actually is really good explaining that they use the terms the Zadoks or the priest Zadokites, that there was a small portion that did leave, and then there was a portion that stayed there, and there was a portion that went everywhere. And the Qumran people might have had at one time a little bit of these people that were from the Zadokites, but they also took in people, through the years of anybody who wanted to come join them. And so, and they didn't have, and if you made it there, you weren't likely to have children, and you didn't live long. So those people probably died out, and then you would bring family if you had children, but you wouldn't be marrying more or anything like that. You would be focused. But again, there is a little bit of validity to that, but there's not a whole lot of evidence to make that jump.
And that's where the Zebediah calendar is, that is the calendar of the priests.
Is that Zadokite calendar connected to the calendar that's described here in the Enoch? Because I talked to people, and it seems like they're talking about the same calendar.
It's also called the Enoch calendar.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Can I talk about my big problemo? So again, keep in mind we're talking about the R.H. Charles translation. This is the one that everybody reads. And again, this version he translated in 1917. So let me read chapter 71. The end of the verse 13, Charles asserts that there is a missing passage that adds to the understanding of Jesus being spoken as the Messiah. He is therefore setting up the reader for his interpretation to follow in verse 14, 15, and 16. So, I'll read it here in a second. I'm going to pull it up. But basically, I want to remind y'all that R.H. Charles believes in Jesus, and he's creating a translation for Enoch. So he understands that this could be describing Jesus as the Messiah. Keep that in mind. Now, he's asserting that there's a passage, a section, like a paragraph, that's missing. How does he know that? He doesn't know that. He made it up. Because we don't have it in the Ethiopian text, and we don't have it in any Dead Sea Scrolls. This is just something he's declaring. And this is what he says. Last passage therein, the Son of Man was described as accompanying the head of days, and Enoch asked one of the angels concerning the Son of Man as to who he was. So this is going to be a dialogue between Enoch and the angel. And the angel is telling Enoch about this Messiah. So let's get into R.H. Charles's version. And he says, and he, the angel, is talking here, came to me and greeted me with his voice and said unto me, this is the Son of Man who is born unto righteousness, and righteousness abides over him, and the righteousness of the heads of days forsakes him not. And he said unto me, and all shall walk in his ways, since righteousness never forsakes him, and with him will be their dwelling places, and with him their heritage, and they shall not be separated from him forever and ever and ever and ever. Now, I highlighted this red because the red indicates Charles's versions he made bold, and he indicates that he changed the pronouns. So throughout this version of Enoch, he makes, in many places, it bold. He makes it bold because he changes the text. He's not translating the way he reads it. He's translating the way he wants to read it. And so you can actually work back by looking at the bold. And if you want to look at my book here, it has the bold, if anybody wants to see it. Now let's look at, what did I do? Whoa. Okay. This is all review. Y'all be tested later. Okay. Now let's look at the actual translation. And he, the angel, came unto me and greeted me with his voice and said unto me, you are that Son of Man who is born for righteousness, and righteousness dwells on you, and the righteousness of the heads of days will not forsake you. And he said unto me that, and all shall walk in your ways, since righteousness never forsakes you, with you will be their dwelling places, and with you their heritage, and they shall not be separated from you forever and ever and ever. And what that's saying is that's right. Enoch is the Messiah according to this angel. This angel is telling Enoch, you are the Messiah. You are the Son of Man. Righteousness dwells in you. R.H. Charles changed it because he wanted to make the reader read it as if Jesus was the Messiah being described. And I actually have the scholars' versions where they actually compared the Dead Sea Scrolls version compared to the Enoch Ethiopian text. And if y'all want to look at it, I got a little thing right there. You can flip straight to it and compare each one. This is what the text says. It's different according to the one that everybody reads. Everybody's reading R.H. Charles, so that when they read it, they're thinking Jesus. This book is declaring Jesus and describing Jesus. There's no problem here.
Okay, is that why, Christians at large, maybe believe this? Because, if you, I've never even heard a lot about this, that doesn't exist, or do not believe that this is possibly.
It's a growing movement, and this is why I'm particularly picking out R.H. Charles, because that's the version that Christians are picking up and saying, look, this book is talking about Jesus, and it's so clear. What's the problem? Enoch is telling us about Jesus, and this angel is telling Enoch and describing Jesus. So it's all a matter of which version you're reading. If you're reading anything different than R.H. Charles, you're not going to see, you're going to come to this verse and you're going to be like, well, Enoch's the Messiah now. So that's what I'm saying is if you're reading the Book of Enoch, if you want to read R.H. Charles, that's fine. Just be aware of these things. And then if you want to read other versions, I've dug into one of them, but this is a scholarly one that was done by some of the top people, and I've actually compared it with what Cody knows, and he said he agreed those are the top experts for the Book of Enoch.
That one verse there is different translation, may being one of the reasons considered why church scholars do not include it.
And it was actually a little bit of a teaser because Tertullian, he advocated for the Book of Enoch, but later changed. He later changed it, and I wanted to mention that too.
You don't look at the translation in its Sefer.
No, I haven't. I mean, I'm aware of the Ed Sefer, but I haven't dug into it. I know Cody has it, and I was going to borrow it from him at one point. I wonder if he used R.H. Charles. It would make sense to use R.H. Charles if you're trying to make the case for Jesus. His translation. And so these are just some final thoughts and summaries. So God's name was not used in the time where his name should be used. The Dead Sea Scrolls versions do not have the books of the parables that contain the Son of Man Messiah text. There seem to be multiple authors, clearly not written by one person. The R.H. Charles translation issues as far as things being bold. And if y'all want to look at my book, I can show you all the bold stuff. Using a Hellenistic calendar, concepts of Greek explanations and celestial bodies moving, contradictions in the biblical account as far as, Noah building the ark or the angels building the ark, and then Enoch being told that he is the Messiah. So these are some things that y'all should just keep in mind when you're reading it. And I do encourage people to read it because this is a text. It exists. It's historical. People wrote it. It dates back far. And just because things are old doesn't mean that they are, of God or anything like that. That's fine. But just keep in mind, old text exists and is part of history. It's part of Jewish history and culture and everything like that. It's perfectly fine. But these are just some things I wanted y'all to be aware of as far as when you get to reading it, or if you get to reading it, to be aware of these things. And questions and comments if y'all want to talk about things. Sure. I would make this PowerPoint available for everybody to have. And there was a lot of stuff that got cut, so there was more. I condensed it. Yeah. All right. Yeah.